Welcome, Amy, to the Vulnerable Voices podcast with your host, me. I'm very, very excited to have you on today to talk about all things menstrual cycles, whether it's PMS, PMDD, menstrual cycles, perimenopause, all the menopause, and all the spectrum of emotions that come with it and how we navigate it. You are doing incredible work to raise awareness for things that women go through, girls go through, and the education that might be missing to actually help us move forward and manage in a healthier way. So I cannot wait to speak to you today and just hear about your journey as well, because I feel a lot of the work and the workshops and purpose led businesses people have usually comes from a place of their own experience. So I'm looking forward to exploring that further
Yeah.
and getting vulnerable with you. So welcome, Amy.
Thanks. Thank you very
How are
much.
you?
Yeah, good, good. Day 4 of my cycle. So yeah, just feeling like energy is increasing. I'm through the more difficult days, and I find as my period goes on, I feel lighter. I really struggle to find another word for it. I just feel lifted. I release, and that energy building, ready for kind of the next my spring summer season, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Hats off to you for showing up on day 4. I am still a bit flat on day 4, but you know what? You're showing up, and we're going to have a really sort of like calm conversation. So, not too much energy, which I hope. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are doing with your business currently?
So I so I've got a background in HR, which then originally led me into coaching, and I got a coaching qualification. Found out I really loved coaching and thought, "Oh, why didn't I do this sooner?" And then it was like, "Well, what will I coach? What's my niche? What's my USP?" But separately to that, had been tracking my cycle for a few years and struggling with my cycle. Physical symptoms, I have to say, I'm very lucky compared to others in terms of my flow, pain. My physical symptoms are pretty okay in the grand scheme of things. Where I struggle is mentally, my mood dropping and really struggling with rage, low mood, irritability, anger, and that was really knocking my self-esteem. I'll come to that in a bit more detail later, but I was very aware of like wanting to understand my cycle. I fell down a bit of a Google scroll hole one day thinking there must be another way. Like, because I've been to the doctors before and I've been offered antidepressants or birth control. And I've tried both. Um, and I just thought one day I was like, is there a more natural way of managing this? I don't want to. With birth control, you're deadening your cycle. Like your body is continually thinking it's pregnant. So you're not getting the full benefits of ovulation, which is not just for reproduction, it's supporting your cardiovascular health, your bone health. So I was very mindful. I was like, I don't want to put a plaster over it. I feel like I want to have a period. I feel that that's a normal, natural thing to do, but at the same time, I don't want these moods and the struggle that I have with it. So I Googled it and looked into it, and there was all that opened a whole world of cycle syncing and looking at the seasons of the cycle, which I can go into in a bit more detail. And then I combined my coaching skills with menstrual cycles, and then I realized, oh, I only know my cycle. I can't coach others on their cycles if I only know my own. So I then thought, well, there's a gap missing. So I then got an accreditation as a menstrual cycle coach. And that was just, I found the course and I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I need to close that gap. I'm really interested in it. And I kind of went on a whole journey of, oh, right, I'm sort of mid-30s and I'm learning actually in depth how a menstrual cycle works and going, oh, right. Okay. And thinking about, well, being really aware about how it affects you, kind of your mentally and physically, but kind of giving that holistic overview. And actually, big thing that jumped out to me about how much of control we have to, obviously, certain gynecological conditions aside, I know, but actually there's more control than we realise. So that's how I've got to where I've got to. So coaching women on their menstrual cycles with the view of having a better experience, building a better relationship with your cycle, actually knowing what it can give you. Um, and then I'm really passionate about then taking that into the workplace and looking at it from a productivity point of view, well-being and productivity. We know that there's happy employees are more productive. So let's add a well-being component to that and understand, well, actually, what's happening in a cycle every month? How is that affecting your energy levels? Not just from a negative perspective, but from a positive perspective. And there's a strength throughout every all phases of your cycle. And how do you work with it? So it's another way of energy management, time management. So taking that into the workplace, I've had a great opportunity early this year to go into a company and talk about menstrual cycles and productivity. So that was a bit of a pinch me moment. So I just want to do more of that, if I'm honest.
No, I love it. And I like the holistic approach that you're taking. But it also makes me a little bit sad that between the age of, when you're in your, I don't know, just approaching high school, maybe 11, 12, when you're starting your period, to about your mid 30s, to that point to actually understand periods is that mid 30s point. So between then and your mid 30s, we're in a state of a void of uneducation, not lack of awareness of ourselves and the resources. Where do we go to find out more? And you
Right.
use Google. You essentially use your own resource to find out instead of actually being able to lean on people to ask. And I think it makes me sad because as girls and women, we go through a lot, and every individual experiences their periods and their cycles and further after that very differently. But in terms of the education around it, it's not just the period itself. It's not when we're just menstruating, it's the weeks before that. And you mentioned the seasons. And I know you tied the seasons with each week in the month. Do you want to go into a little bit of detail about the seasons and what each week, the names, what they mean, and sort of energy levels as an individual yourself? That would be really
Yeah,
helpful.
this really stood out for me, and I'm sort of quite a visual person, sort of visual learner, and that sort of sits well with me. So when I saw this kind of associating the meteorological seasons with your cycle, I was like, that makes sense. So your period is your like inner winter. So that your first day of your period is the first day of a new cycle. So I even used to think that your cycle would start after your period. I mean, I don't know where I got that from, but I didn't know what no one told me otherwise. So the first day of your cycle is the first day of your period. That's your inner winter. So typically bleeding between sort of up between 5 and 7 days, whatever is your normal. And then during that time, then after that, you'd move into your follicular phase, where you've got an egg that's maturing, and you'll notice that your energy levels are starting to rise, and you find that your mood will lift a little bit as well, typically. And I call that your inner spring. So springing to life, things are starting to feel a bit more zingy. Then there's and then midpoint of your cycle is your ovulation. So that's when high fertility. That's when, from a reproductive perspective, if you're wanting to get pregnant, that is the time that you are most fertile. The egg is ready in the fallopian tube, and that is kind of typical peak confidence, energy, your mood. There's a wonderful dance with the serotonin. There's estrogen and progesterone receptors on the brain. We just don't know that. So anyway, you're just a lot more energized, and yeah, and the connectivity in terms of wanting to be around people, and you're more outward. So you've sort of feel typically this build, and then so that's your inner summer. And then after you've ovulated, we then go into our luteal phase, which is our inner autumn. So typically you'll start to feel a little bit, your energy levels starting to drop a little bit, but also change. So for me, I do notice I've become a bit more inward. And it's not necessarily that I don't wanna socialize, it might be that I just wanna socialize in a different way. So perhaps ovulation Amy is quite happy to go for a meal, but if someone else picks up the phone and says, "Do you wanna go clubbing on a Wednesday night?" I'll be like, "Great, I'll see you in 10." 3 days later, that could be a very different Amy. I'll be like, "Do you know what? Let's go for a meal and just have a nice chat, and then I'll go home." And the no clubbing after it. God no,
Oh,
that's not what I'm about. I've had my nice chat. I've had connection, but it hits differently. So you're naturally a bit inward. So that's your inner autumn, and then you gradually become more. You'll notice your energy levels become more and more um, withered, I guess, and you become a little bit more not withdrawn, but you feel like you're more energy going inward. Now, from a reproductive perspective, you're nesting potentially a fertilized egg. So that's kind of your very early days of pregnancy and all that. But that's kind of where your energy levels typically go. And until and then your period starts again, and then you're in your inner winter. So I found that the seasons of the cycle, when I read that, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense to me. And a big thing that jumped out to me was like, "Oh, I don't need to be the same every day." It explained a lot of things.
I feel like I love that explanation and I use it often. It was actually a spin-off from not only the live that we did last year, but when you spoke to Lucy from the Wilderness of Creativity and you spoke about these seasons. And I reference nesting period all the time, every month it comes around. And it's the best way to describe it because I visualize this bird in this nest just hibernating and be like, "Do you know what? Just leave me here for a little bit. I just need a few days, and then I'll poke my head out again a little bit." And it was just the best way to describe it because actually, as humans, we are naturally in sync with nature anyway. The moon cycles, how it affects us, how it affects animals, the tides, the blooming of like spring, and how actually trees and plants they shed, they nest, they kind of go away a little bit and then come back again. So why aren't we respected as women to go through these cycles? Why are we always pushing through? Who has been
Yeah.
We have been conditioned as women to push through and act as men in a way. Men have a 24-hour cycle. They can go the same every day. They go to sleep, they've got their
And
boost.
yeah, and I don't think there's think our society and obviously the progress for women over the last 70, 80 years is obviously significant. So I don't think there's any malice in it. We just didn't know. But, the point that we start having more rights and women go to work, well, if, of course we were just going to follow the 9 to 5 of a man because we didn't know any different. And before you start working, it's not like we need to do an assessment of women's biology before we've just gone into it, haven't we? And
Yeah.
naturally, we're going, wow, we've got these rights and we can work, and we then drive to work like a man. The world is on a man's clock, and no one knew otherwise. Um, and just recognizing that now there's a whole different biology. There's a whole different, there's one of my favorite sayings is, nothing blooms all year round, so why should you?
That's so true. That's
And
very
I
true.
think like this year compared to other years, and I'm guilty of it, is goal setting at the beginning of January. I'm in the
Mm.
depths of winter at the point of goal setting and go getting. I'm like, I don't really want to be awake until it's light, and then I want to be hibernating when it's dark again at night. Like, it's not really much light hours to do it. So again, like actually, why don't we why don't we start our goals in spring when things really do kickstart? That's when everything else is coming to life. So why don't
Or
we?
even celebrate the new year. I think celebrating the new year in December is the worst decision ever. I think it should be spring, like some other cultures do, where they're like, actually, we're naturally awake. So are the animals. So are the trees. Like, why don't we? But it's true. It's conditioning based off of something that was predating all the information and knowledge that we have now. There's so much progress being made and awareness, which I think is amazing, including you being one of them. Um, And then I just feel like we are in this comparison culture that if we feel another woman's able to cope or manage or do 100 million things, why can't we? What's wrong with us? And then we start going, we start dismissing ourselves and actually dismissing our needs around the time of the month in terms of the whole month, which phase we're in, what we need, what we don't, and trying to set boundaries in terms of where we are, what we can manage, and what's actually healthy for us. Because ultimately, dismissing ourselves in that way has a massive impact on our mental health, mental well-being, our emotions. And you said this earlier, it's not so much the symptoms, it's the symptoms of the your mental health that's been affected. If we break down actually the symptoms in terms of our PMS symptoms versus PMDD symptoms, because this is a topic that keeps going around and it's on my algorithms everywhere. Just to shine a light on what it actually means, can you explain the difference to us?
Yes. So there's premenstrual syndrome, which is a collection of symptoms, physical and mental, that typically prevail in the luteal phase up until someone's menstrual cycle. PMDD, premenstrual dysphoria disorder, is an extreme version of of PMS. So, and the severity is so much that it actually can have a significant impact on someone's ability to carry out day-to-day life in that phase, in terms of extreme low mood, fatigue, suicidal ideation. Like it can be very, very serious for a lot of women. Um, and so PMDD would be those more severe, extreme symptoms that happen every month. And another kind of characteristic to determine that it is PMDD is that the minute your period arrives, those feelings disappear. So it's really obvious if you were tracking your cycle that it's attributable for your because of your hormones.
Uh,
That is what's
and it's
driving it. And it's they still don't know fully why PMS and PMDD happen, but in general, it's very much to do with some women are more sensitive to the hormone fluctuation and the shift. Once estrogen has risen, luteinizing hormone is released for ovulation, and then estrogen stops doing its work for the while it's matured, and then progesterone kicks in. But then also, if the egg then doesn't get fertilized, then the egg gets reabsorbed back into the body, then both hormones are then lowering and breaking down the womb to then obviously go into a period. And it's those fluctuations in that second half is typically difficult for many women because of the fluctuation. There are some talks about I went on a study day because I'm a member of NAPS, National Association of Premenstrual Syndromes. Um, there's a charity for it. I mean, how many people know that?
I
There's a
didn't until you just told me now.
there's a charity in the UK for PMS and PMDD. The amount of men and women, medical professionals that are doing research into this. I went on a study day about a month ago. I should have done some content around it. Was amazing. But they brought up the fact that the PMDD situation and a link between neurodivergent brains and PMDD. So something to suggest there's a correlation there, that if you are diagnosed as neurodivergent, there potentially is an impact on terms of your the severity of your PMS symptoms, which might mean that you get PMDD. So then
Uh,
there's talk around um, how birth control can be a help
uh,
in particular severe cases, because you need to think about the risks outweighing the benefits. And I think I've refined my message over the last 5 or 6 years. I used to be very much like, I mean, I'm still on the I'd rather not do birth control for my own personal reasons. However, I certainly can't sit here and say, "Do not take it." I mean, I'm not medically qualified to say that anyway, but I certainly wouldn't wanna put off somebody if they are suffering significantly with that PMD if they're diagnosed PMDD. There's something suggests that there's medication that they can take on a cyclical basis that will help manage that second half of their cycle because, again, the benefits way outweigh the risks when you're looking at something so severe. So, yes, like, that's the difference.
I love the way you explain that. It makes so much sense, and I feel like the PMDD side, you've just explained me in a way, and it's
Okay.
something I think that's where my suicidal ideation and thoughts come every month, and it's more manageable now. But when I was younger, 21, between 21 and 23 is when I actually wanted to end my life, and I almost did. And it's now, having spoken to you, following the work that you do, and actually researching, I've noticed the patterns, I've noticed the sensitivity, and it's something you just said. As soon as you get your period, you're like, oh, I'm human again. Oh my God, the fog's lifted. And I didn't know there's charities, so I think this would be really useful for people, women. I think men also should be able
Men,
to
yeah,
understand because it
absolutely.
impacts everyone in terms of
Yeah,
support, relationships, friendships, and also how we work as a society, as men and women, or however you choose to identify. We can work better together by having more knowledge and education. So yeah, I think knowing the two difference and recognizing your patterns, it actually takes self-awareness to go, right, every month I'm going to try and jot down or be aware of what's happening to me, when, what phase, and what are the sort of obvious symptoms that keep occurring.
yeah,
I often promote and would love, and I've been doing this myself actually, is more natural, holistic therapies in terms of yoga, in terms of the type of activities within those weeks that I'm in. So, what is actually beneficial for ovulation phase? You know, I can do more of a hit workout, high intensity, but as soon as I hit luteal, the anxiety rises and cortisol. I cannot do it, and I'd get migraines. And it's these things that kept happening. So you've raised a really good point here, and I hope someone listening might go, "Oh, actually, it might be me too," and there's somewhere to go. So thank you.
and thanks
Um,
for sharing that, Nisha. That's obviously really sensitive.
I've not shared that before actually, so thank
No,
you.
and I feel honoured that you've shared it with me, and I think the big thing is that if you've got awareness, sometimes I think if, um, if you've got that awareness and you're having a particularly bad day, if you know it's cyclical, you kind of can talk to yourself in a way of going, "This is temporary.
Mhm.
This is hormonal. It will pass." Not to say that you want that month in, month out, not at all. But if you've got an awareness that you go, "Oh, it's hormones," then talking to yourself and going, "Okay, right, I know this, I won't always feel like this because I know I come out the other side," and it's remembering to tell yourself that. But that awareness is so important because then you can go and speak to somebody about it. And there's a range of support for PMDD, and it could be a kind of a multifaceted approach for the treatment. So it could be a mixture of, and it could be taken on a cyclical basis. Again, a medical professional will fully assess, but it could be a mixture of um, antidepressants or some kind of cyclical birth control mixed in with some CBT. Um, and then, of course, your general lifestyle stuff, which everyone should try and pay attention to, regardless of whether you've got a cycle or not. But and we all dip in and out of what is a good lifestyle or not. But a medical professional can then kind of tailor some support for those that have really severe or have PMDD.
We were talking about this before we actually jumped on to record about the tests. and actually to be curious to get some sort of testing that might help bring awareness to what's going on inside. Could you just share some of your own insights or knowledge around what people can ask for at the GP in terms of testing around hormonal testing? What can we do there?
So I think from because it's not because syndromes is a kind of a collection of symptoms, there's not one test that will say you suffer from PMS or you have PMDD or suffer PMDD. But what would be advisable is that you keep a track of your energy and your mood. So track the day of your cycle, and ideally you have like 3 months worth of data so that, or even more than a month at least, to show that there's a pattern. Because if you take that to your GP and you say, look, when I'm on my period, I feel like this, but the week before I feel like this, and these are my moods and behaviors and things, they're likely to then put two and two together and say, well, there's clearly a hormonal thing happening here.
Mm.
Um, but if one thing I would say, just generally as a test, if anyone's concerned, like get your blood pressure checked, get a thyroid check. Appreciate the doctors might ask, well, what other symptoms are you having? But you can at least ask. I know somebody who's been really struggling with their cycle. These are her words, so this isn't backed by science, and I'm not a medical professional. But recently, she told me she thought she was struggling with perimenopause. And doing all sorts of things naturally to try and manage her symptoms. And someone actually said to her, have you had your thyroid checked? And she was like, oh, no. She's got an underactive thyroid.
Wow.
So she's now on medication for that. And I guess with most medications, it's not a quick fix, takes a while to get into the system, but apparently that can be mixed up with being something else. I think obviously just get all the checks that you can at your GP. Make sure, I call it an MOT, get your blood pressure checked, get your cholesterol checked. Obviously keep up to date with your smears. Uh, if you've got any doubt, or certainly raise it with your GP about maybe a thyroid check, then you'd obviously have to be guided by them about what they say or with that suggestion. But certainly take the data with you around your patterns of what you're experiencing, because then they'll probably suggest some other things as well, potentially, that then they go, with all this combined, we believe that it is PMDD, or not just PMS, but it's you are struggling with some kind of hormonal fluctuation every month yourself, and eat well.
No, it's
Yeah.
really helpful. Thyroid often comes up. We have these conversations at home because obviously we're a household of predominantly women. And so obviously generationally, my mum's generation, for example, it wasn't talked about. It was a lot of self-investigation and having to push GPs to be like, well, there must be some further tests you can do, because often I find sometimes they can be a bit dismissive, especially women's health. It's always like, oh, it's just hormonal related. It'll calm down. It'll be fine. Just keep a track and we'll see what we can do. But by the time you've gone to the GP, you've already noticed the pattern. You want some action being taken. And because of the time restraints, or, sometimes financially they don't want to invest in those testings because everything costs money. Sometimes putting a plaster over it, like you said, about giving a pill or taking this or a quick fix, as it isn't actually getting to the root causes, which we need more time for. And I often find with the PMDD, if I do have it or the symptoms suggest, given how much I've been self-reflecting and aware every month for the last couple of years, I am fearful every month of the luteal phase. And then I'm fearful of perimenopause and menopause. I've always said HRT can give. I don't think I can do it. So,
Yeah.
what would you say to women in terms of that fear, who may be struggling more with their PMS, PMDD, of that luteal phase, of the changes in hormones?
Um, Certainly keep track of the moods and the severity of them, and then reach out to a medical professional, like without question on that. Aside from that, and just generally from a PMS and PMDD, and just generally like thinking about what foods that you eat in your luteal phase, anything that so maybe avoiding caffeine, anything that raises your cortisol levels or mimics anxiety or so thinking about food, slow releasing energy food so that you're trying to keep satiated for longer without any crashes. So, eating loads of sweets and crashing or caffeine, or keep hydrated. Um, do some form of exercise, even though you will not feel like going for a run. Certainly not suggesting a run. Um, I've really got into reformer Pilates recently, and oh my God, I'm addicted to stretching.
Such a good release, isn't it? You don't realize.
Oh my God, I was like, stretching, brilliant. Why have I not done this before? But no, the level of like really stretching out your pelvis, because it
Mm.
feels like a release. So I don't know about you. I don't suffer PMDD. I know that much because my moods or how I don't sway into that severity realm. Um, for me, the worst it gets is I'm just vile in terms of I'm just so angry. But I don't know if you can relate to this, I feel really pent up. I feel like a pressure pot. Can you relate to that?
Less so much a pressure pot. I just feel really low.
Okay.
Almost like a balloon's just completely. And I used to get my mum's observation about me. She's more aware than I thought she was, but she's been being aware of me for my whole life. And
Oh,
when it came to my cycles, it was like my personality changed. And she's like, "Where are you?" Like, I'm not here. I'm just so inward and so low. And in comparison to my sister, where she's a bit more steady, the odd cramps here and there, a little bit teary, I'm gushing tears. I'm very low. I feel a sense of like hopelessness. And then as soon as the period comes, I'm like, I'm back. And then it's like, okay,
okay.
it's horrible.
Okay. You mentioned about feeling like a deflated balloon. So I was just saying, like, thinking about um nutritious food, protein, anything that stabilizes your blood sugar basically and keeps you satiated so that you're keeping steady from a nutritional point of view. Keep hydrated, stay away from the caffeine or reduce it at least if you I mean, I love my coffee, but making sure you have it on a full stomach, for example, and just and give yourself permission to do what you need to do to keep well. Now, interestingly, I was going to make a point about you've said already about your sister who seems to be more steady. Now, I expect naturally you're making a comparison and that you should be more like her. And why are you not? Rather than for now accepting where you are and going, this is not a great time for me, and that's okay. Because everything else I was going to do I've done, and everything I still need to do can wait. So certainly during that luteal phase where it's going to be a challenge, what can you do to make things easier? How is it that you can move things, um, change your commitments, say no? There's some boundaries here around like don't force yourself to go out if you have absolutely no desire to go out. How do you ask for help at home? What meeting at work can be moved? And give yourself permission to be like, I'm going to be a bit slower today. That's okay. I'm just different. Like, and just think about how you look after yourself in the luteal phase and take away any kind of pressure around, well, I should be this and I shouldn't be like that. And why am I like this? You are. So fighting it is only going to make you more upset. It's only going to exacerbate the mood. It's only going to make you feel worse. So knowing it's temporary, almost lean into it, I'd say.
Yeah, I love that. It's like respecting yourself. And I love that you came on to the topic of boundaries. boundaries around that time of month where you are feeling low or you're aware that things are going to dip. And we talked about this in the live about how boundaries are a really form of self-respect and actually can boost your self-esteem. And self-esteem is something that I know you were struggling with or trying
Yeah.
to manage, or being aware of how much it impacted your self-esteem. Do you want to talk to me about how it has impacted your self-esteem being labeled sort of angry Amy, which, you're not an angry person. Generally, you're not. And it's other people's identity that they've created for you
Yeah.
around that phase where you're feeling not yourself. Talk to me about how that experience has been, and what was it like being labeled angry?
Oh, it's really upsetting actually, and because it was a real dent on who I thought I was as a person, how nice I am as a person, and it was a big part of why I wanted to look into cycle tracking and is there another way to manage this? Because that was my big thing, was like I've said, my mood. I have what I've called is ovulatory rage, so I feel a shift immediately after ovulation. I have one particular
Mm.
day where I did want to kill anyone that would say hello. Like,
It's not funny, but you do feel it, right? You
I
just can't help
I'd
it.
wake
It
up
comes.
I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, "Ah." And someone would say my housemate would say morning to me, and I'd be like, "How dare." And I had this rage all the time, and I was like, "What is this all?" So I was, like, grappling with this because, like, "Why do I feel like this? This is horrible," and I couldn't keep it in, and I was just horrible, and that which made then I thought, "Oh, I'm a horrible person," and then friends commenting, going, "Oh, angry Amy's here," and you're like but then I couldn't get angry because that was a self-fulfilling if I was angry, they'd be like, "Oh, here she is again then." So I was trying to not be angry about it, even though I felt quite hurt by it. I didn't wanna make it a thing because they were like, "Oh, well, I'm the problem." So I just didn't say anything, so I kinda laughed along, but inside I'm like, "That's really shit that you think that." And it really kind of was ingrained that I am this horrible, angry person that just walks around like a bear with a sore head, but I couldn't find the words to communicate. Sort of knew. Did I know it was cycle related? I guess I did, but I didn't. I never made a direct and go, yeah, well, it is this. Um, Assumed it was, but I just also felt frustrated because I was like, I can't do anything about it. I just have to push through it. And then when I realized what it was and how I could look after myself differently, it went away because suddenly that awareness and knowing how to look after myself, I was like, ah, this, and I've nailed it. And I'm not saying I've never had it since. That would be a lie. But I have had it, and it's not been as intense, and it's not as frequent because I know what I can do to help that phase. Um, Nutritionally, socially, work, whatever. But yeah, it was really hurtful. Uh, and that was years ago. And now I can sit here comfortably and say, yeah, I was vile at points, but I don't say that with feel like I'm hurting myself. Like I'm like, yeah, no, I was vile. But I know that was not me. That's not my personality. It's not,
Characteristic.
yeah,
Yeah,
I can sit here.
it's not your innate character. Because when you meet you on face value and, as you get to know you, you're very kind-hearted and soft, and you have a strong will. So anger is not something I would ever like connect you
Yeah.
with. But I think to raise awareness for the emotional spectrum and the emotional will that we have. Anger is here. Underneath that, we've got frustration. You mentioned the word hurt, and hurt comes from other people, one, dismissing you
Uh-huh.
and your feelings, two, feeling out of control. It's not something you asked for, and no one would want to wish that on anyone. And two, like frustration in terms of is this feeling that comes and I'm unsure of when it will go. It will go, but you're not sure when, and it sets you back. So anger is the easier term people use to label and describe you. But underneath that, there's a spectrum of emotions
Yeah.
which people are not aware of.
Yeah, so
And
true.
and it's a self-limiting belief that stays with you that this is who I am. I'm horrible. I'm not nice. But actually, what do you feel you've had to incorporate any practices? So I know I use affirmations, like positive ones, to really get me through some of those luteal low phases. Do you do any practices for yourself that's helpful when you are feeling those kind of like pent up emotions that kind of calm it?
I check in with my thoughts because I am very hard on myself. So and towards others when I'm frustrated. So I have to check my thoughts and go, could I look at this in a more compassionate way towards myself? So I have to, I suppose that's a CBT thing, isn't it? Check your thoughts. So it's I've got better at it, but I still, we all have a default, don't we? And I still fall into those traps sometimes, but I've got the tools to go, hang on a minute, check in with your thoughts. Are you being compassionate towards yourself and others? Is there a more compassionate, fair way to look at this? And then I can calm myself down. Um, I am mindful about what I eat. I'm also not going to sit here and say I don't drink alcohol and eat cake because that would be a lie. But everything in moderation, including moderation, but thinking about obviously going into your luteal phase, if you're not feeling great, I'm not going to eat cake and I'm not going to drink. So I try and be aware from a nutritional perspective, what can I put in my body to keep well? And then I'm very aware of my energy levels. So this week, I'm day 4. So started Monday, and it's not always the case, but this particular time I felt very tired. So I haven't gone to the gym, and I'm not like, oh, I haven't been to the gym. I'm like, no, just not the gym this week because I don't have the
And
energy.
that's okay.
And that's okay. I'll go next
Mm.
week. So I've already noticed that, like, tomorrow I'm booked in for a reformer, day 5. So that's stretching and Pilates. And then I know what days I'll be next week. So I've booked on to HIIT because I would know what I'm going to be like next week. So I've booked cut classes accordingly. So yeah, so there's no gym this week. I've moved slower. I've given myself permission to be like early night, bath and bed, and thinking about, yeah, what am I putting in my body? So yeah, have I answered your question? I feel like I've drifted.
Definitely have. They're very practical tools, and the way you speak to yourself. But it's the internal check-in, isn't it? How we speak
Yeah,
to ourselves is really important.
yeah,
And ultimately it's no one else's business. It's just yours, right? So that you could show up in environments and places to your best because that's what we want. I want to actually talk about the changes that we go through as women as we get older
yeah.
in terms of moving into perimenopause and menopause. What starts happening there? What's the difference between perimenopause and menopause, and what internally is shifting for us?
Okay. So menopause really is the end point. It's when you've not had a period. So the NHS definition is if you've not had a period for 12 months or menopause. Anything before that is perimenopause or premenopause. So the pre or perimenopause is the transition to menopause. But it all gets interchanged. I'm in menopause, I'm menopausal, but you're menopausal really at the point that you haven't had a period for 12 months. That is
Mm.
the medical definition of menopause, and that's how it's defined with the NHS. So anything before that is the transition to that. But actually what actually starts to happen first is your progesterone levels drop first. So the first half of the cycle will be a bit, so typically some people will have shorter cycles, but then it can be very, you could have longer cycles, you could have shorter cycles, you could have cycles where you don't ovulate, but you still bleed. Like
Mm.
everything starts to misfire. Now, the reason for that is your number of eggs are significantly reduced as you get older, but also the quality. So
Mm.
you're born with all the eggs you'll ever have. You lose eggs being born, sorry. You lose eggs being born, and even through to puberty, you are losing eggs. They're just being absorbed into the body. You you have all the eggs you'll ever have. You don't produce any more as when you're born. You don't produce any more in the build up to puberty. You already have them. So when you're getting into perimenopause realms where the cycle starts to go a bit awry is because, first of all, progesterone levels typically drop first. That can be due to the fact that there's less eggs and less quality. So if you ovulate and the egg is released from the follicle, then that follicle becomes a temporary gland, which is incredible, called the corpus luteum. That's a temporary gland, and that is what produces progesterone. So if the egg quality is not very good, the follicle might be less quality, which means it might produce less progesterone. Whilst the egg could be fertilized and you could ovulate and then later have a bleed, your period might be shorter because there's less progesterone, less womb lining, less things, and then that all breaks down and then you have a period sooner. That's a shorter. So typically progesterone levels drop first, then estrogen levels will start to drop. When some people go for tests, they get their FSH, so it's follicular stimulating hormone. You can have a test to see your levels, so your FSH levels, and I think it's called TSH level. So there's another level that they check. But very generally, I'm not going to talk too scientifically, but typically sometimes you might be determined that you are perimenopause if you've got high FSH, because what your body's doing is trying to ovulate, trying to mature an egg because
Interesting.
it's
Wow.
because it's there for you to reproduce. It's a reproductive system. So it's like, whoa, not got many not many eggs left, and then start firing off more and trying to stimulate more than one follicle. So it could try and stimulate more or none at all, or the stimulating hormone go really high and then there's not enough estrogen to trigger the luteinizing hormone, because the luteinizing hormone is knows when there's enough estrogen that says that an egg's matured, and that sends a message from the pituitary gland to go, right, release the egg, it's ready. So it's this kind of your ovary, I kind of got your brain, pituitary gland, ovary axis just is doing different things because the levels of hormones are changing. So it's it starts becoming a bit, well, up and down. So some people find that their periods get longer first, then they go shorter, then they might not have a period at all for 3 months, and it might come back, and they might have one every 4 weeks, and then it could just pause again. Like, oh, mind blowing.
Can we just pause and have respect for all the women out there? Anyone who has ovaries and periods, and we go through so much and we need grace. Honestly, what you just explained happening internally is nuts. Like
We're incredible.
we go through that. Yeah. We're like ETs, just like all of this system that's happening is crazy. And like no one really understands the true nature of what's happening internally. So go, oh, I'm just perimenopausal. Oh, it's just the menses. Oh, we the more knowledge we have about what's going on, the more we can actually access resources and people and conversations like this to be aware of what is going on internally. I know you're doing a lot of work, or you're trying to educate people in workplaces and schools. How has that been, and what kind of questions are coming up? What kind of revelations are happening, and how is that helping people when you're doing a workshop?
I think it's more I haven't had many questions directly, and I think in an open forum, I think because obviously it's quite a sensitive subject. But what I get either in the moment or in a follow-up is like, so just people say, "I can't believe I didn't know that. I just can't believe I don't know how my body works." It's more that, and when I did a talk somewhere, there was a woman in her 50s that said, "I'm in my 50s and I didn't know that happens in a cycle." It's more the, "Oh my god, why don't we know this?" And we should know this, because if we knew this, it would be so helpful. So I'm getting comments like that as opposed to follow-up. So I guess it's kind of the awareness phase of everyone going, "Oh my god, we should know this." And then the next bit of like, well, how does that play out? And I remember when I did my talk about productivity in the workplace, and I used kind of like the seasons of the cycle as a bit of a framework, and what sort of things you do when, and how your cognitive function and energy levels change through a cycle. And I had a lot of women and some men as well, just nodding, going, like, "Oh yeah, no, I get what you're saying," or a bit of a light bulb moment of, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course I'm gonna, yeah, of course," and that expectation, you've got to be the same every day and push on through regardless. Um, You don't, and to your comment earlier about, you don't have to say anything, like, if this week, thankfully, I haven't had many meetings, but, you know, I could push into next week, but I don't need to say with anybody, "Oh, it's because I'm on my period." Just say, "Oh, look, can we push back to next week?" Not many people go, "Oh, why?" They just go, "Yeah, sure." Make the diary work for you. So, but sorry, back to your comment, like, what are people saying? I think that's the big thing I'm hearing all the time is, "Oh my God, this would be so helpful if everybody knew it."
Yeah, the realizations of hits and actually what we have been missing for so many years. And you only started realizing in your mid-30s, similar to me, like the last couple of years. And you're just like, we've been suffering for so long because education out there is not being taught correctly. And, actually it impacts people in ways I can't believe. Mental health struggles, how many of it's related back to women's cycles and education and what we can do. And also, I think holistic therapies to help manage some of the symptoms and having resources there, because not everyone, maybe ethically as well, is inclined to take medication or want those
Yeah,
fixes, or
exactly.
it's yeah, it's a whole spectrum of things that can contribute to healthier health for
It's
women's
very
health.
personal as
And
well, obviously, isn't it?
yeah, do you think it's still a taboo to talk about, given we're in 2026? Or do you think we are in a good place, or do you think we're breaking into
We
a good
are a
place?
bit better. I think there's still a long way to go. I think it's still an element of taboo. I was in a talk in a workplace and men have turned up, and I've always had a really good reaction, but, you know, there's still quite a few, and women too, not just men, that are just a bit like, no, look, this isn't a thing, um, a bit uncomfortable about it. Um, and actually, I just share a bit of a kind of, not a conflict in my head, but a thought that I sort of bounce between. And I'm like, thinking about cycle syncing, thinking about being more aware of our cycles. And I'm like, am I inadvertently undoing 80 years of women's progression in terms of, well, because I'm championing like women's bodies? Does it look like it's a, like, am I saying, "Oh, we can't work that way," and is it coming wrong? And I don't think I am, but I worry that it's coming across, well, I never want it to be, "Oh, I can't do that because 'cause I'm on my period," or, well, it's more about understanding where your strengths are and where your preferences are, and we know what time management is, so why don't we apply energy management? We know what a healthy lifestyle is, so why don't we vary our food? But it's never to say that you can't do something on your period, or you can't, but recognizing when's best to do something.
Mm.
And I get worried.
I
Yeah.
actually see it in I see it as a really positive way. I see what you're doing in terms of boosting productivity, boosting confidence,
Yeah,
boosting the level of engagement between male, female, however you want to identify, just a level of understanding. Because women can do it. We have proved without the knowledge and pushing through and having to deal with it, we can. We get on with it.
yeah,
But actually, we would be at 200% if we were respected in terms of what we go through, have education around it, and the right resources and tools in place, i.e., team members, workshops, other things, boundaries and respect between each other, so that productivity can continue to rise. And you flip flop. One day you might be menstruating, one person might be ovulation. Flip them around so productivity still remains. That's how I see it. I think you're actually making the change in the right way and uplifting the humanity.
yeah,
Because we've proven without it we can do it, but we can do more if we just we're
yeah.
respected for what we go through.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. We've been doing kind of all right without it. So with this extra knowledge, surely that's just even more powerful, isn't it? And having that awareness for choice and improve well-being, like for me, doing this work and looking after myself, my productivity or my confidence and well-being is a whole different level. Like my self-esteem was significantly improved when I discovered all this. Um, and I think the big thing for me was like, stop. It's that pressure piece and stop trying to be the same every day because you're not, and today I knew there was things testing me more than they would if they happened next week when I'm going to be easy, like ovulating time, follicular phase, and
Period.
yeah, I'm gonna bounce off me, and I'll be like, oh, silly, and it would just wash over me completely different as it is today. But I had that awareness of going, I know this is hitting me harder than it normally would, but go with it. It's okay. It's not wrong. It's just different, and learn to manage myself in a different way. And if I know I'm feeling a bit more heightened, and I don't have the brain power for it, I just I just stop and just if someone's talking at me and I think I can't deal with this, I just go, yeah,
That awareness for yourself, your cycle, the impact it has mentally, physically, actually is a high level of emotional regulation because you've done enough self reflection to regulate your emotions in those low periods or those high periods, and you're not harming anyone. You're able to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through. And it's an I thing. And they teach you that in therapy and all of this stuff is accountability for I'm feeling like this. It's nothing to do with you and allow me that time and space. So I think you've got a really high level of emotional intelligence and regulation, which is important so that you can function, quote, normally when you step outside in each phase, right?
yeah.
And so I love that. If you were sat opposite your younger self, um, knowing what you know now, what would you say to her?
Oh gosh, what a great question. I would say, look, you're gonna feel rubbish. Um, and those moods, they're not a reflection of who you are. You are There's something significant going on inside your body with your reproductive cycle, and you just need some tips and tools and support to take out the intensity of that, because these moods, you do have control over these moods, and they can change, and you will feel better, I promise. That's what I would have said. And that's what I could have done with somebody saying, "You will feel better. You do have control over this. Let's just do this, that, and the other." Not putting any blame at anybody. It's just that when it was.
What you needed at the
Yeah,
time. And I love that you're now giving that to yourself. That's what inner child healing does, and the work I do with people is actually reflecting back on the love that you're giving them
yeah,
now that you would have wanted back then. I love that. It's true. We are not our emotions, but we can manage and regulate them with the proper tools and communities and knowledge, really.
yeah.
Where can people find you, connect with you, and what are you up to these days? What's coming?
My Instagram page is lifesync_coach. So I'm there on Instagram. Um, I've also got a LinkedIn page, which is focusing on body literacy for hormones and enhancing productivity. So that I'm just Amy Blakeman on LinkedIn. So if you search my name, you'll see my little tagline and you'll know that that's what I do. So those are probably my two key areas. I'm on Instagram. So my Instagram is more about my coaching, etc. I think I am looking at different products and ways of delivering it because I'm not 100% sure coaching is actually what everyone wants, needs, because, and I'm quite reflective of it and stuff. I think where it is that there's lots of apps that you can track and there's and things, and I think they are a great tool to some extent, but it's understanding then what you do with it. It's all very well tracking your symptoms, but how do you change it? So I think I need to look at my coaching offering a bit more. Do people want it? Is it not coaching? Is it something else? Uh, but looking at delivering more workshops. So I want to create some workshops that I will call Go With Your Flow.
Of that.
So I want to come up with a series of workshops. And I think really that piece of and um dealing with that difficult phase. I mean, looking at it holistically, but actually, what do you do holistically throughout all of the cycle that means that your luteal phase is a bit more easier, but then what extra stuff can you do to look after yourself and what are the challenges and stuff and open up that group. And then from a work perspective, taking that awareness into the workplace and then looking at our cognitive and energy management. So I'll talk about the cycles, but it's not into the same depths. It's more from a cognitive mood, energy management perspective that I then think about how would you then apply that in your role to manage confidence, well-being, and then again productivity. So bits and pieces. And hopefully I'm going to do a webinar with a contact who's in the neurodiversity world, and we're going to look at neurodiversity and hormones in the workplace. So just devising what that could look like. Uh, so that's going to come up hopefully at some point this year. Uh, yeah, that's what I've got
So
planned. Yeah.
exciting. Well done you. It's incredible. And you know what, keep me up to date. I'll be sharing and supporting because I think it's incredible. I'm very passionate about this, having been self-reflective on my own cycle. So I love what you share. It's really, really helpful. And I wish you were around when I was younger. Honestly, people will benefit so much. But we're here now, you're here now, and that's what is making the difference. So I'll be posting your social media
Oh,
and anywhere people can connect with you on the description in YouTube, and also on my Instagram as well, so people can come and find you and chat to you and connect.
I know this is live and we're recording this and everything, but I've obviously got to know you over the last couple of years or whatever. But if you ever need to pick up with me separately, then you know where I am.
Thank you. Do you know what? I will keep you in mind because what I'm uncovering, I may need some more support than I think I do. But generally, I find holistic therapies that I've been engaging with have been really helpful. So for me, I haven't had to um, utilize medication yet or right now. And so, yeah, but if anyone needs your help, I will put them in your
Well,
direction too. But no, thank you.
I will just say quickly, because one thing stuck with me when we spoke ages ago when we did our live. Lying in the butterfly position when you've got cramps. I do that and I'm like,
So good.
oh, Nisha.
Do you notice how long it takes for you to start feeling relief?
Oh, No, I don't, but I will time it. I'll be interested now to see if there's a pattern for me because I haven't timed it, to be honest. I've just been like, "Oh god, this is feels so good."
What do you feel when you're doing that position? Like, when do you use that position? In what phase of the month?
I tend to use it, when I am on my period, and if I'm particularly I'm not always, like I say, I not to boast too much, but thankfully I haven't been too, uh I haven't struggled too much physically, but sometimes if I am particularly crampy and I feel like that pressure pot, I feel like this pressure pot right around my womb. So
Mm.
lying in that reverse butterfly is a release. So sometimes I do that in the lead up if I feel particularly, like I said, that pressure pot feeling. Um, and then make sure I do Pilates and stretching and stuff, and that there's a reformer recovery where you just hold the stretch for longer, and as you know, you just and like you do yoga and you just gradually stretch and you just go further and further and further, and that is just gold.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I've taken practices from my Hindu culture and all the like yoga practices from thousands of years ago. And I particularly researched the yoga positions for women and our ovary area. So it's like a sit squat position, the reverse butterfly, and then there's also like when you sit cross-legged, but in this instance, it's like you put your feet together and the knees come flat out.
Yes.
That and then just, pulsing it, it's basically getting all the oxygen around there, and it's been heaven. It's
Oh,
the
okay.
cramps come and they'll disappear. Yeah, I'm glad you tried it. I think it's great. So no, thank you for sharing that. I'm glad we can share to each other. I love it. This is why I love this podcast because there's so much education in it.
Yes.
And I also wanted to acknowledge and say thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing
No,
your
likewise.
journey. It's 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 really helpful and it's really brave. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming on today.
No, I've loved it. Thank you so much. Let's do more.
We will. There'll be loads of spin-offs because we could talk about this
Oh,
for
honestly,
days.
yeah.
Even now I have more questions. I'm like, nope, we'll need another couple of
Right,
hours,
right.
but
That's another
I
podcast.
will put your I'll put your contact details and everything once it goes live. And yeah, I just wish you all the success with what you're doing.
Thank
So
you so
thank you.
much, my love, and thank you for having me. And you look after yourself, and like you say, you know where I am if you need me.
Thank
Bye, my
you.
love.
Take care.
See ya.